Welcome back. The Shangri-la Dialogue came to an end this past Sunday with defense officials from the Indo-Pacific acknowledging that is, the current challenges to regional security amid North Korea's persistent provocations and tensions between China and the U.S. For more, I have Professor Kim Young-jun from the Korea National Defense University. Professor Kim, welcome back.
Thank you.
I also have Professor TERENCE ROEHRIG at the U.S. Naval War College live on the line. Professor ROEHRIG, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Right. Professor, we'll start with you then. Before we delve into the security summit, could we start with a few words from you with regard to North Korea's latest display of defiance this past Sunday, that is, when they fired multiple artillery shots between 8 in the morning and 11 in the morning? What do you suppose is the intention behind these persistent acts of provocation, Professor ROEHRIG?
Sure. And I think in this particular case, it's an important reminder that the security concerns from North Korea are more than just nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities, that the artillery capabilities that can reach Seoul, those are serious concerns and need to also be remembered. As far as intention, it's difficult to know entirely, but I think that there are a number of things that could be possible explanations, and they don't necessarily need to be mutually exclusive either. I think in many respects, until we know exactly what was tested and such, it could very well be simply a technical test to test new capabilities, capabilities that may be modernized, things like rate of fire, other sorts of elements to their artillery capabilities. It also can have an important political impact domestically for North Korea's population to show strength internally, as well as external elements as well. But I think sometimes we jump quickly to the belief that this is an attempt to try to get the U.S. and South Korea's attention. I'm not sure that's the case in this particular instance. I think it may be more about testing capabilities and demonstrating those capabilities.
Right, and against that backdrop of North Korea testing its capabilities, Professor Kim, what do you believe then were some of the highlights of this year's Regional Security Summit over in Singapore?
Yes, Shangri-La Dialogue is the right time and the right place. First of all, after the presidential election, a new defense minister, Lee Jong-seop, of the new ROK administration, firstly attend this kind of multilateral regional forum. And this is a very good opportunity to introduce a direction of a foreign and security defense policy of the new ROK administration to the international community, including the ROK-US alliance and security cooperation between the ROK, the US and Japan, and also a policy toward North Korea. Secondly, this is a multilateral dialogue, including the US and China, and the two countries have made their own agenda and argument for diverse and sensitive issues like Taiwan and others. Because of the US and China strategic competition, international media focused Shangri-La Dialogue this year. Moreover, this dialogue was the first meeting after the Russia-Ukraine war. So influence of and impact of this war naturally became a topic of this dialogue.
Right, and staying with the same question, Professor ROEHRIG, what are your thoughts with regard to some of the highlights at the latest Shangri-La Dialogue?
Sure, and I just want to second the issue of Ukraine being a very big shadow cast throughout many of the different presentations and discussions as a piece. I thought that it was also important to see how much was being done in the sideline discussions as well. I think that is a very important and underappreciated element of these meetings and a crucial piece to that. I thought it was interesting that China and the United States laid out their very clear and expected positions in regards to Taiwan, but a question was raised in regards to how long China might be willing to wait in regards to the status quo, which at least for the moment is the positions that is tolerable to all sides. And there was not a clear answer for that. Lastly, I'll just add that I thought it was also interesting the comments made by the Indonesian defense minister, that it points to how oftentimes the focus falls on the bigger powers in the region Indonesia reminded us that there are a number of other states that are not the big powers, that have different perspectives, different positions on how these things fall out and how they have to try to navigate these difficulties between major powers.
Right, that is a valid point, Professor Roehrig, and thank you for shedding some light on that, or giving us a perspective on that, of course. In the meantime, Professor Kim, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida shared a rather sobering speech about the state of global security, claiming that Ukraine today may be East Asia tomorrow. How do you respond to these words?
Yeah, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida made very the emotional speech, also important speech. He emphasized cooperation, harmony rather than tension and physical conflict in this region naturally, and is a common anxiety about this region today. The U.S. and China has been a great rivalry in this region, and its competition and possible conflict will be possible in the future. Thus, in a multilateral dialogue, his point was natural. But at the same time, Japanese position is more cooperation with the U.S. and Indo-Pacific country against the rise of China. Thus, a dual meaning. In his speech, if somebody asks who will be in Russia in East Asia, the answer will be naturally there will be China. Thus, in this context, his point was not just about importance of peace in this region, but also at the same time a warning against the rise of China and also North Korean threat as well.
Professor Roehrig, staying with Mr. Kishida's keynote speech, some pundits claim his emphasis on the threat of nuclear weapons was more striking than his warning about possible regional conflict in East Asia. What are your thoughts?
It was interesting, the level of considerable detail that he went to in regards to nuclear concerns and Japan's position in regards to nuclear weapons, how he did not see a contradiction in Japan's positions for reliance on the U.S. nuclear extended deterrence guarantee, but also Japan's call for a world without nuclear weapons. But I think his comments also raise one of the fundamental questions that is part of the discussion of the longer-term impact of Ukraine, and that is looking at Russia's nuclear threats and trying to decide what lessons are other states learning from Russia's statements in that regard. And does it raise concerns and perhaps increase perceptions among some states that nuclear weapons may in fact have more utility than perhaps was believed? And also certainly what lessons might North Korea be gaining from this? And I think there is a potential debate for that. But again, those are the central question. That's the central question that I think Kishida was raising here is what role will nuclear weapons play going forward in international diplomacy?
Right. And staying with what Professor Roehrig has just said, Professor Kim, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has vowed that he would use power for power against threats to his country's sovereignty. Now, what do these words tell you about the prospects of denuclearization here in the Korean Peninsula?
Yeah, Kim Jong-un mentioned again power for power speech, and due to a tension between the U.S. and China and the U.S. and Russia, North Korea already recognized that China and Russia will not join any kinds of U.S.-led UN sanction. So sanction will not affect on the North Korean behavior. And Kim Jong-un knows that the new administration will strengthen a partnership with the U.S., Japan, and the Pacific country. So he wants on strengthen ROC-U.S. combined exercise and security cooperation between the U.S., the ROC, and Japan. And powerful power justify North Korean nuclear missile development as well as a partnership between the China and North Korea. That's why powerful power speech is important for North Korea to be understood in this context.
Right. And Professor Roehrig, going back to what you said, now given the status quo that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could actually get countries to think about boosting their own arsenal, what do you suppose would be a feasible way of addressing nuclear tensions here in this part of the world? Should we demand a complete surrender of all existing weapons by North Korea? Or should we simply seek a verifiable halt, that is, in the development of new weapons? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that for some time now, it has been fairly clear that North Korea is not going to denuclearize under most circumstances. More pressure, more engagement is unlikely to change North Korea's position. And so I think while the goal of denuclearization still needs to be maintained for some important political and non-proliferation goals, I think increasingly the position of the US and South Korea has to begin to shift towards strengthening deterrence, as it already is doing, the importance of the alliance, because again, I think that denuclearization is going to be difficult. And we also have to start looking at North Korea as perhaps more of an arms control problem. Not that that's easy. That is going to be exceedingly difficult as well. But if there is some possibility to gain something of along the lines of a testing moratorium to codify that, I think that would be an important step forward. But I think denuclearization is going to be a very, very difficult goal to achieve. And we have to shift in another direction.
Right. And moving forward, Professor Kim, over in Singapore this past weekend, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin drew attention to an alarming rise in the number of unsafe and unprofessional encounters between Chinese aircraft and sea vessels with those of other countries. How do you interpret such hostile encounters?
Yeah, recently Chinese naval ship, or Blue Man, we call, intervened in the South China and East China Sea. Also, China and Russia intervene on air zone of South Korea, and two countries have strengthened this combined military exercise. Chinese expansion with the artificial island and Blue Man in this region, especially in South and East China Sea, is already famous. So I think it's a Lloyd's speech is the warns China for its aggressive expansion of military and behavior in this region against peace in the region.
And Professor Roehrig, addressing the Shangri-La Dialogue virtually, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky conveyed a very carefully crafted response to a question about Taiwan's potential fate by claiming that diplomacy and punitive sanctions only serve as preemptive efforts to stop wars and that they serve little purpose once war begins. Do you agree?
I think he made an important point there, and sanctions are a difficult issue writ large in that their record of success in changing state behavior is not terribly impressive. At the start of any particular crisis, the threat of sanctions or possible some partial imposition of sanctions while holding back others in reserve could have some deterrent effect. But once a state commits to using force, it is unlikely that sanctions are going to have significant cost to be able to offset what the state has already made as a commitment to its willingness to use force to address some particular issue. So I think sanctions certainly send an important message, and I think in many respects here, it is about deterring as well future actions, demonstrating the unity behind a number of members in the international community to pose these kinds of potential costs for a future action. In Russia's case, or perhaps in the Asia-Pacific. But again, I think that once the conflict has begun, sanctions are more difficult to actually change state behavior.
Right. Now, we have time for just one more very brief question to you, Professor Kim. Defense Minister Lee Jong-sop and his Singaporean counterparts signed an upgraded defense agreement on the sidelines of the security summit. And generally speaking, Professor Kim, how do you assess the Union administration's efforts to boost collaboration with its regional partners?
Yeah, the Union administration first strengthened a partnership with the Indo-Pacific country and the US and Japan. Singapore is one of the important partners, definitely. The Union administration shared concern about aggressiveness of North Korea and China with the US and partner in the Pacific region. Yoon decided to join NATO conference, and he wants to be a member of the Indo-Pacific and NATO country in saving liberal institutionalism world order with the US against the revisionist countries like China and Russia. And another thing is the defense industry is another important factor in focusing defense diplomacy in this region like Singapore.
Right. Professor Kim, as always, thank you very much for your insights on that. And Professor Roehrig over in the US, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.